Hello and welcome.
All right.
Way to go, Spielberg.
Yeah. All right.
Can't imagine why not.
All right. I guess we're rolling. Welcome back to the show, The Church of Mark. We have the wonderful Don Ross with us today. Welcome, Don.
Howdy doody. Nice to be here.
Thank you for coming. And you're on a current tour, is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of a mini pop-up tour. What ended up happening was I have a guitar weekend that I occasionally do. I used to do it here in Ontario quite regularly. And then when I moved to the East Coast, I did it a few times there. But then, things got busy, and then the pandemic happened, and then finally, a friend of mine, John McMillan, he has a place that he's just bought up in Muskoka. And he hosted a guitar weekend for Tony McManus up there last year, and it went really well. And he said, well, you want to do revive your guitar weekend up here. So that was a great idea. So I'm doing that in the middle of September. And then a friend of mine got married this past weekend, and I thought 2 trips to Ontario in 2 weeks? No, I'll just drive down and stay. So I drove down the oting day, and staying at a friend's here in Toronto.
Oh, excellent. Very good. So this is a driving trip for you.
Yeah, and so since I had this little 2-week period, I talked to my agent and I said, look, we have almost no time, but could you just book me a few just really, really intimate shows that I don't have to work too hard to promote, and just to make a few bucks to pay for the trip? And he was like, sure. So yeah, I'm playing twice in Toronto, and I'm playing in Hamilton, I'm playing in up near Port Perry, and I'm playing in Welland. So,
okay, great. Yeah. And so your shows happen in Toronto. That's happening this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the 5th and 6th. So the 5th I'm at the Rivoli, the 6th I'm at Annette Studios.
Oh, Annette Studios.
So,
okay.
Yeah, Thursday and Friday. And then, Sunday is Hamilton at Stonewalls. And then next week on the 11th, I'm in a little place called Nestleton, which is near Port Perry.
Oh, Nestleton. Okay,
yeah,
great.
At a farm there called Harmony Within. A friend of mine's promoting a show there. And then, the last show before the guitar weekend is on the 12th in Welland at a place called the Bank Art House.
Oh, okay, very nice.
Yeah, and I've never played in Welland, so never played in Nestleton either. So
okay.
I know everybody else has played in Nestleton. I was feeling left out. So.
Oh, excellent. So for
if you
those
can make
that,
it there, you can make it anywhere.
Right. So for those that have never been to a Don Ross show, what can the audience expect?
They can expect a Nestleton-style show. No, it'll be great. Since I'm traveling alone this time, I decided I'd bring all my guitars. So I have a regular pitch guitar, a baritone guitar, and a harp guitar with me on the road.
Oh, wow.
And I don't bring the harp guitar that often because it's 40 pounds of fun in the case. It's like a big, awkward. Imagine, yeah. It's like carrying a rectangular. It's like carrying a 3D version of Nebraska around in your car. But it's an amazing instrument with all these extra bass strings on it, and a lot of fun. All the guitars are made by a fellow named Mark Beneteau, who's from here in Ontario. He's from St. Thomas. So you'll hear a lot of guitar music, but you'll also hear some vocal music because I do sing on my albums as well. And and I don't have any brand new material that I'll be showcasing, like nothing that I haven't recorded yet. But my most recent album came out about a year ago, and I'll be doing a lot of stuff off there as well.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. And that album that came out, what was it called?
It's called Water. It came
okay.
out, in the spring or early summer of 23.
Okay.
And, it was kind of a pandemic album, basically. A lot of people made pandemic records.
That's true, they did.
Instead of breakup records, I make pandemic records.
Right.
Yeah. And so I wrote a lot of the music during the pandemic, and I wrote a lot of it actually not for guitar originally. Some of it was written as orchestral music, and then so some of the orchestral things got turned into arrangements that include guitar.
Okay.
And then there's a collaboration with Bruce Cockburn on the album.
Right.
Yeah, and
very
with
nice.
Michael Manring, the great fretless bass player, and Sean Hall, a really fine guitar player from Washington State, and Brooke Miller, a great singer-songwriter from PEI, and the City of Prague Philharmonic is on there, and the Atlantic String Machine, which is a string quintet from where I used to live in Charlottetown.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So what was the interest getting into sort of these orchestrations and using these sort of orchestras?
I've always wanted to do that. I just never really had the knowledge base, like the chops. So I've done some orchestration in the past, successfully, but without being too ambitious about it. And then just before the pandemic started, I was kind of bemoaning to my wife. I was saying, well, this whole live music thing, I don't know if it's ever going to get any better than it is now. And if it's not, I enjoy it, but I was just at that time, I was feeling it's really hard to make money at it.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, is there something else I could be doing? And then she said, well, would you consider going back to school? And so I said, well, only if I can find an online master's program in orchestration for film. And she said, well, I'm driving. You got your iPhone. So I started scrolling, and I found a program in about 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I enrolled, and I got my master's degree during the pandemic. It turned out, it coincided with the pandemic.
Right, okay.
It wasn't the plan, but I started the program, and then the pandemic shut everything down a couple of weeks later. So I had no excuse except to stay home and study. And my wife always joked that I was on the flat food diet, because I was in the studio the whole time. She joked that she would slide food under the door, which didn't happen, but it's a funny joke. And because I was doing 14, 16-hour days to get the stuff done. Because if you've ever done anything for orchestra, it's so labor intensive. It takes so many hours to compose. It is not that bad, and then you have to start imagining how you're going to orchestrate it, and then the creation of the score takes sometimes weeks.
Right.
And then you have to print out parts for everyone.
Right.
So it's a massive undertaking.
So how many piece orchestra are you writing for then?
That particular one was a 70-piece.
Oh, wow, okay.
And what happened was, I was at the tail end of my my master's degree. I had to write my major project for my, what they do instead of a thesis for your master's, was I had to score a short film. And so I chose this documentary. It was made in 2018 on the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 8 mission.
Oh, okay.
And so all three astronauts were still alive at that point. The guy who took the famous picture, whose name, Bill, I forget his last name, the Earthrise photograph.
Right.
And then
coincidentally, I'm wearing the moon watch.
Groovy. Awesome. Right, so this is all very appropriate. Very appropriate. So, the Bill guy who took the photographs, he just passed away recently, but he was still alive when they made the film. And Jim Lovell was one of the other astronauts. He did a lot of those missions. And the other guy, whose name escapes me right now. And all three of them were in their 90s and being interviewed for this thing. So it was really cool. It was really nice. And I was very fascinated with the moon projects when I was a kid.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense to pick that one. And it was a half-hour film, and it needed music pretty much from wall to wall, because it was that kind of movie. Right. So I came up with all these different cues, and there's a scene towards the end where they're talking about how they really thought there was so much euphoria around them orbiting the moon and getting that close to landing without actually landing, and sending these amazing photos back and films back. And the whole world was watching, and it kind of felt like the whole world was united, in one common feel-good thing. And so the astronauts talked about how they came home and everybody was so ecstatic, and they really thought, wow, we've really changed the world. And then a few weeks later, we're back to the same crap, right?
Right.
So I ended up calling the piece, The World Didn't Change After All.
Okay.
So it's a very kind of melancholic, but very beautiful melodic piece of music. And it worked really well. I wrote it for piano and orchestra, and then I got the session back from Prague, and I mixed it, and I thought, guitar would work just fine on this tune. So I added a guitar part, and the rest is history.
Right. And do you find it easy to write for film? Or do you see a scene and the ideas come right away, or you're tinkering away on the piano, or what's sort of your process?
Yeah, more the latter. What I usually do is I have the visuals set up, and I start playing it, and I watch it sort of naked once. And I'm not naked, the film is. And then then I think, okay, what kind of mood would fit the visuals? And I pretty much always work at a MIDI keyboard and just sort of start, hashing out some ideas, just with a piano sound. And then what I usually do then is I record the ideas that I like from my improvisation. I flesh them out in a piano sound to the visuals until it feels like a piece. And then I start assigning the orchestration. So, and of course, in my studio now, I have enormous numbers of sound libraries, so orchestral libraries, and and they're all played by real musicians. They're all organic instruments, but acoustic instruments. But you can obviously control how they're used and when they play and what kind of articulation they play and that kind of
Right.
stuff. So it ends up sounding extremely realistic. I mean, 90% of the shows you're watching on Netflix and stuff like that are scored, even if they sound like real, piano and strings or something. Usually just one composer, and she's sitting there just working everything out in the MIDI control.
The sample libraries are amazing.
Yeah.
You really can't tell the difference now.
No, it's pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy.
I mean, it wasn't pretty crazy until quite recently, and there was this huge leap.
There was a huge
with computing power and memory and the storage that we have now. Like my laptop, I used to have to do everything on a computer network with 3 computers and 4 computers, and now I can do it all on a Mac laptop with like 4 terabytes of storage with all my symphony libraries on it.
That's awesome. There you go. Mm-hmm. And your studio is Atmos. You can record. You're doing your mixes in Atmos. Maybe explain people what Atmos is. A lot of people don't know what that is.
Well, Atmos is an immersive audio format, and it's sort of a development on, back in the day there was quadraphonic back in the 70s, and then there was through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, there were developments like 5.1 audio. Mm-hmm. So a lot of albums are being remixed in 5.1. And then 7.1 became a thing, and 7.1 was something sort of both for film and music. It was getting used a lot. But then what Dolby did, now all those formats use multiple speakers and a subwoofer. That's the usually 7.1. That's the 0.1 is the subwoofer for the low end stuff. Then what Dolby did was they came up with another version of the 7.1 format that also incorporated overhead speakers, usually 4 of them at least. Okay. So it was a 7.1.4 format, but instead of just being 12 channels of sound, it's what they call an object-based system. So instead of like with stereo, you have these signals. They might have been recorded in stereo or in mono, and you just decide where they're going to be in the left-right space, right?
Right, that's right.
And you sort of create a kind of quasi 3D between the two sides, and the idea is that you're listening with your 2 ears, and a sound might be all the way to the left or all the way to the right or somewhere in between. But really all you're really doing is panning mono signals.
Right.
With Atmos, what you can actually do is what they call take an object. So that thing might be a mono signal, or it might be a stereo pair, and you're placing them in 3D space. And with all the speakers set up in my studio, I can say, well, it would be really nice if the acoustic guitar sounded like it was in front of you, but also a little bit like it's maybe like the player is maybe up on a pedestal a little bit.
Okay, right.
And so I find for my own stuff, the acoustic guitar tends to sound really lovely, both in headphones and in speakers, when it's just got this slight raised thing so that the overhead speakers are involved. Now, the object-based system, you can have my setup, which is kind of the minimum number of speakers you need to mix properly and to listen back properly, 7.1.4. You can also do more. You can do 9.1.6. Some people do.
Oh wow!
So 9 speakers around you and 6 overhead and 1 on the floor. And you can expand it all the way up to 128 speakers in a cinema.
Oh wow!
There are cinemas that do that.
Yeah.
Or you can also do what they call a fold down. So you can listen on a lot of speakers, or you can listen on 7.1 if you've got a 7.1 system that you bought 10, 15 years ago.
Sure.
You can listen in 5.1. It folds down to that too really nicely. It sounds really good. Mm-hmm. You can hear all the bits. And it also folds down to stereo. So the whole idea is that if you do a really good Atmos mix and you keep checking how does it sound in the fold downs, and then ultimately if it sounds good in stereo, there's your stereo mix, and you've also got all the Atmos mixes. And you can do what's called a binaural one for the right kind of headphones. So that's the revolution, is that now you can hear immersive audio on headphones where you couldn't really before.
You couldn't before. And do you see a lot of artists using immersive audio to do their record mixes?
Yes.
Or is that slowly catching on
It's
more?
really growing now.
It's really growing, okay.
In the last 2 years, it's really grown leaps and bounds. What's happened is the labels, the large labels, have bought into it big time. And so if you listen to Taylor Swift, she always does a Dolby Atmos mix.
Oh, okay.
But also there's like really serious jazz labels like ECM and ACT and all these European labels. They always do Dolby mixes now. A lot of catalog is getting remixed in Atmos. Like all the Beatles catalog now is done in Atmos. Even their solo stuff. I was surprised to see the other day this George Harrison record I used to listen to when I was 14. I came up on my Apple Music, and there's a Dolby Atmos mix of it, and I was listening to it in the studio and thought, sounds pretty good.
Oh wow,
They did a great job on this one.
Wow.
So that's the thing. Like, you can take stuff that's very familiar, remix it. It doesn't always work 100% successfully. Some things I've heard sound a bit weird in Atmos, but I think those were early days.
Okay.
I think now the engineers have gotten so familiar with the format, and there's so much quality control now that I think that it's getting to a point now where most Atmos mixes sound amazing.
Oh, okay.
Also, Apple Music has really taken on with it, and they actually incentivize creators to create an actual Atmos mix as well.
Okay.
Now, they don't pay any less than they did for whatever that was
Sure.
stereo royalties, but they pay better royalties if you do an Atmos mix.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
so that's starting to happen.
Okay, I'll write that down, Laura. We're gonna get to the Atmos. A friend of ours just opened an Atmos studio in Thunder Bay, Blueprints, and that's Jean-Paul DeRover. A shout out to him. Just opened this year.
Nice.
It's amazing, just what you were saying, the immersive sound and all that.
There's a bunch of them here in Toronto.
That's right.
obviously,
Yeah. So, do you think we've reached the pinnacle of like audio recording and listening, having this immersive sound, or what do you see happening in the future? Like 5 years down the road, are we going to have a new technology that totally turns that around?
It's possible. Like, we're kind of in this thing with, it's kind of like the VHS beta era right now when it comes to immersive, because Atmos has been adopted very heavily by Apple. That kind of was maybe the clincher. That probably means that Atmos is going to be the dominant format. But there are other formats that have been developed by other companies, also immersive, and they work a little differently. I think Sony has one and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but as far as I can tell, they've mostly just been adopted for cinema use and like home theater kind of stuff. But Atmos, I think now, for music, it's kind of been used since about 2018. Those were the early days. And then for a few years before that, it's been in cinemas. And now pretty much every major city has at least one Dolby Atmos cinema.
Right.
And then everything you watch now on Apple TV Plus and Netflix, they're all mixed in Atmos now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Netflix, sorry to get off topic, but Netflix, I've been asking other people this. Do you notice the audio is awfully compressed?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you listen to it.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a 7.1 system
Okay.
hooked up to my TV.
Right.
It sounds pretty good.
Okay.
But I think what ends up happening is that if you're listening in a stereo setup or on headphones or whatever, I think it can be a little crowded because they're being quite ambitious.
Right. Okay.
I think what'll probably happen as far as future stuff, like more and more people are using sound bars to get Atmos, in a simple way, in an inexpensive way.
Right.
More people, like every year, like so many millions of sets of headphones get sold. Headphones are where most people are listening to music now.
That's right. Yeah.
They don't normally have hi-fi set up in their houses anymore, which is too bad.
Anyway,
I
know.
So headphones. I mean, I get exhausted wearing headphones after a while. My ears get tired.
Yeah.
But I have a really good pair of headphones for listening to Atmos that Apple makes a really nice pair of over-the-ear ones that have the chip inside them that decode the Atmos.
Okay.
And I mean, listening to an album that way just is fun when you don't have your speaker set up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think we're onto something now. Now that it can be kind of democratized in this headphone atmosphere,
Right.
then I think that gives it a chance. I think the other immersive audio systems never really had a chance to catch on in a big way because they were more for like home theater buffs,
right?
A lot of man caves,
you
with
needed the
5.1s
technology, the hardware to have the experience.
Whereas now anybody can listen to Atmos. I mean, you don't really get the same experience as with the speakers,
sure,
but with really good, the right headphones with the right decoding, it's a really nice expansion on stereo. When you A/B them, like just on your phone, if you A/B between Atmos and stereo, sometimes it's shocking.
Well, I don't have a cell phone. I'd have to do it on her phone. But
I'm sure they have it for flip phone now. By now, they must have it for flip phone or landline.
That's right, landline. That's right. Put it on a landline
with the dial. I'm sure, the special Dolby Atmos for the dial phone. Yeah, that's right. Remember when I was a kid, my dial broke one time, and I had to do this.
That's right. Yeah. The old days. See.
Those were simpler times. It was so much better.
That's right. Phone numbers were only 7 digits. You can remember them easily.
A friend of mine, this is true, a friend of mine opened a trading booth in or a trading post in Saskatchewan a long time ago. His great grandfather or something opened this thing, and he was trading with the indigenous people out there. And he was one of the first people to have a phone in the area because he really needed one. He was really remote, needed to order stuff in. And my friend still has his great-grandfather's business card, and it says, Saul Friedman, telephone 4. His phone number was 4. And I can always imagine, you're on a phone, you're about to call a guy and say, what was the number again? Was it 5? No, 7. I always got 4s and 7s mixed up. Was it 7?
Oh, jeez. So on this driving tour that you're doing, I'll assume that you listen to tunes in the car. I mean, I don't.
Constantly.
So what's on your playlist these days?
I have a very eclectic taste in music. I'm known as a guitar player, but I listen to guitar music almost 0% of the time. I find if it's really great music, I'll listen to it. For me, it's all about if it's good music, I don't care what instrument it's played on. I mean, good meaning I like it.
Sure.
Good is a subjective thing. But I actually prefer listening to piano music than guitar music.
Oh.
So because I find that there are more good composers who play piano than there are good composers who play guitar. There's a lot of good guitar players who are not very good composers, so that's why I kind of give up on a lot of what they put out. But currently, I'm kind of obsessed with this piano player. He's becoming quite well known. He's a jazz player from the States. His name is Robert Glasper.
Oh.
And he's come out with these gigantic projects. He did 3 of them called Black Radio. So it's 1, 2, and 3. And he sets up his band basically, and then he has all these guest vocalists come in. So everybody from Anthony Hamilton, really great R&B singer, to Nora Jones, to Yeba, to countless, Liddy, all these really great singers and rappers and stuff like that. And so those albums are all great. And then he's also done work with the Robert Glasper Experiment, his little jazz band. And then also he's put out 2 records this year. One of them, he just decided to put out an ambient record. And a lot of it is kind of okay, I can work to this, I don't have to listen too carefully. But there's one tune on the record called Going Home. If you get a chance, it's on, you can only listen to it on Apple Music in Dolby Atmos. But it's called Going Home. I obsess with it now. I have to play it all the time on the piano. It's just the most beautiful melody. And so I'm really into him. I'm really into a whole lot of other people. Well, Keith Jarrett's an old hero of mine. I've kind of been rediscovering a whole lot of records by Joni Mitchell that I hadn't listened to in a long time. Okay. Yeah, and actually, I want to do a vocal album when I get over this little cold that I have. And I'm actually thinking about doing her tune, Refuge of the Roads.
Okay.
It's got a fantastic guitar part.
Right, yeah.
And she was just it still is, an amazing guitar player, a real pioneer. So she was one of my big heroes when I was a kid on the instrument. And then I kind of, there's another piano player from France named Grégory Privat.
Oh.
And he's originally from Martinique, the French island in the Caribbean. But he lives in Paris now. And my German touring partner, Jule, she and I started obsessing about his music. And we've done arrangements of 2 of his tunes for 2 guitars. And we toured together, and then we had to split up. She went to Italy, I went to Spain. And then we worked out our schedules so that we could meet up again in Stuttgart to go to his concert there. That's fans, those are real fans. So they'll arrange their trips home to go see a show. And the show was amazing, and we got to meet him afterwards. So he's another, I'm obsessing over his music right now too. He's got a new album called Phoenix. Check it out.
Okay, that's great. So out of all the places that you've toured in the world, do you have any favorites that you love going back to?
Well, in terms of places I really, really, truly love to be in, no matter if I'm playing or not. I mean, Italy's a big favorite, and I get to go every couple of years or so, and I play mostly in northern Italy.
Okay.
And love it there very much.
We're actually headed there the first time in October, actually.
Oh, congratulations.
We've never been, so we're looking forward to it.
Where are you headed to?
To Rome.
To Rome itself.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you won't believe it. I mean, if you're into walking, I did this one walking tour where I started at the the gates of the Vatican, and I walked to the Colosseum, and that's just one of the most beautiful walks. And you go through the Forum and everything. It's fantastic.
Oh, wonderful.
And I just took the metro back.
Okay.
So the Rome's amazing, and then northern Italy is so beautiful, and everything about the culture I love very much, and the weather's beautiful. I play a lot in Germany. So Germany is a huge music market. It's the third biggest music market in the world. Even though it's a very small country, but it's very densely populated. So there's lots of gigs. You can get there and just drive an hour to another one or 2 hours to another one. None of this, 6-hour flights like we do in Canada.
That's right.
So that's handy. So even if you're playing for less money per gig, you can book so many gigs on a tour. And also they treat you really nicely.
Awesome.
They always put you up in a hotel and give you a meal, and not like in a lot of places where you kind of like, well, they unlock the door for you, and that's about it.
That's right. That's exactly.
But so I've toured in Germany so much over the past 30 years that I'm actually fairly fluent in German now. So that comes in handy.
Okay.
Yeah. So
can you share a few words like?
What shall I say? Ich freue mich so sehr, hier zu sein bei dir. In diesem schönen Studio und bei Church of Mark Podcast. Das ist sehr fantastisch. Fantastisch. Sehr, sehr schön. I knew I'd blow at least one word.
Okay. Now we'll get a big German audience, hopefully. So in addition to touring your own material, you were also involved with the Sultans of String, the Walking Through the Fire project.
Yeah.
Now, how did that
I seem to remember standing next to you during some of those shows.
Yeah. I think I saw you on stage a few times.
I think I saw, we ran into each other. Ships in the night. Yeah, that was kind of neat. I guess it was a couple of years ago. Chris McCool got in touch with me and said that they were doing this Indigenous collaborative project, and they wanted me to be involved. And it was kind of interesting because like they had some ideas they threw at me, and I thought, I have this unfinished idea. It would be kind of melancholic. It's kind of a sad tune, but I guess maybe it would be appropriate to think about missing and murdered Indigenous women or something, with this piece of music. And that's what we ended up calling the piece Highway of Tears.
Right.
And we kind of ended up all co-writing it a bit. And then MJ Dandino played fretless on it. And when we did the tour back in the fall of last year, got to play the show regularly with an orchestra and everything. So that was a lot of fun. And then it was nice to bring the show to Edmonton Folk Music Festival.
That was wonderful, yeah. Fantastic.
Playing for 5 trillion people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
But, yeah, it was totally crazy.
It was crazy, yeah. Is that like one of the biggest audiences you've played to? Or you played to bigger audiences in Germany, or?
Well, I've played that festival several times, usually as a tweener, what they call a tweener. So,
right.
Which means you're between the ages of 12 and 16. No, it means that you're on between two acts that need to set up. And one time I did the tweener for the full gamut.
Wow.
Played 2 or 3 tunes for how many 15,000 people there were there.
Right.
I think the biggest audience I ever played for was Parliament Hill on Canada Day one time. And I think there were 60,000 people.
Oh, wow, that's big. That's huge. That's
right. It was just like, it was a sea of humanity as far as you could see.
You can't make out any particular faces. It's just
No.
People.
It's like Parliament stock.
Parliament stock. So what's, I guess, next on the agenda for Don Ross? Are you doing the tour, and then obviously you're going to head back home? Are you taking any downtime, any vacation?
Actually, it's kind of full on until at least the end of November. I hardly have a day off. I have this tour, this mini tour in Ontario, and then I get to go back to Nova Scotia where I live for a couple of days. Then I'm heading to Europe again. I'm playing in Scotland at the Ullapool Guitar Festival at the beginning of October. I'm doing these shows in Scotland and Germany with my friend Eula. So we're doing the festival, and then we're running to Germany to do a couple of shows. And then I come back solo and do I do a solo Alberta tour. And then Eula joins me in Revelstoke, BC, and we start a tour that goes all the way down to San Diego.
Okay, wow.
And that goes until the end of November.
Oh, wow. So you're very busy.
Yeah, it's really crazy busy. Well, I signed on with a new booking agent, and it's working out pretty well. So having a good booking agent Dylan Stone's a good booking agent.
All right.
Makes a big difference because I've had a lot of not so good booking agents in my life. So it's nice to have somebody who's dedicated.
So how do you find the right person to work with? Or is that just trial
total
and
accident?
error?
It's total accident.
All right.
I think you can put the word out and try to find somebody, but it doesn't always work out. Usually the most obvious choices are too busy.
Right,
because they're so good.
That's right.
And so I've tried that many times over the years. Actually met agents and, would you? Well, the roster's really full, and I'm not saying that because I don't like your music. I'm saying that because it's the truth. And so that happens a lot. And then in this case, it was funny. It was a guy that I've worked with many times. He was living in BC, and he did a bunch of shows for me, mostly on Vancouver Island in the Lower Mainland. And he contacted me and said, "I'm working as an agent now, and I'd like the agency, which is I work. He lives in Hawaii because he's from the U.S. originally, but the agency he was working for is based here in Toronto." And he said, "Yeah, it's a Toronto-based agency, but they have offices all over the world, and I'd like to add you to the roster. I'm going to talk to them. Great, terrific." And then he said, they've decided to pass, but I'll take you on directly. And I thought, well, I've worked with him a bunch of times. Sure, why not? And then it turned out he was really, really, really busy booking a 50-piece orchestra all over the world. And I was kind of like going, we need to book some shows. So fortunately, his business partner, with whom I've also worked, this guy Dylan, said, it's okay, I'll do it. So,
great.
So it worked out. So he's booking the blazes out of me and the tour with Eula. He booked a lot of that as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Basically, he'll book me in any territory where I don't already have a representative. So I have somebody in Europe who does most of that. But then, he'll do shows for me in the UK if they come up and stuff. And
that's excellent.
That kind of stuff.
Great. And we've both been in business a number of years, decades, we're no spring chickens. And there's been a lot of challenges that have changed over the years. For example, when we started, I'll assume you didn't really have the internet either. It was like going down to the library.
I'd carry a pigeon.
Right, and then looking at phone books and calling, right? So,
yeah.
And then the old-fashioned press kits, remember? You'd have to get a 8x10 photo.
I remember when I started this business here in Toronto, when I was living in Toronto, I had a mailing list. But it was a physical mailing list.
That's right. Everyone did.
And every time I had a show, it was like $250 in postage.
Oh, I know. That's right.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Well, even just sending out the press kits, it was a considerable amount of investment to send those out to promoters and artistic directors and so forth. So now those sort of challenges have gone away. Now that we have technology, we've got EPKs, we can just send a streaming link to the music. Yeah. So what are the new challenges for musicians that are starting out today, do you feel?
Oh, definitely the fact that there's just this endless ocean of music out there now. Back when I was, first starting, people were, presenters and agents and stuff would complain, there's hundreds of CDs being released every week, how are you supposed to keep up? But now there's thousands and thousands and thousands of songs being uploaded to the streaming services every day.
They say 100,000 songs a day are released.
Yeah, it's insane. So, like I say, it's like this endless ocean of music, and how you're supposed to, emerge from this endless ocean, and anybody's going to be able to throw a life preserver, cold, a life preserver to you to help you swim through the whole thing it's a big head scratcher. So many young musicians will ask, well, you've been through a lot. What do you find still works for you after trying all these different things? And what I always tell people is, it's basically content creation. It's about the same as it's sort of seeming to be for everyone. Create reels, create videos. Unfortunately, it's a hassle to create all the video stuff, but nonetheless, it's essential. It
is, yeah.
And so you get people's eyeballs first, and then you draw them into the music. It used to be that you could just rely on impressing people by, they hear something and go, what's that?
That's right.
But it was still hard then. It's not like it was easy.
No, that's right.
Especially if you were doing a non-mainstream kind of music.
That's right.
It was never easy to be a musician. It was never easy to get attention. It was never easy to get airplay. It was never easy to get an agent. It was never easy to get a manager. But the people that you see who are really savvy with it now, I know solo musicians who are incredibly dedicated to creating. I post 3 times a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays every single week. I have a schedule. I know when I'm gonna actually make the. I have a time slotted in the daily schedule for this content creation. Nothing else takes precedence. It's like they know how vitally important it is, and I'm nowhere near that organized about it.
Right.
On the way here, I shot a quick reel for my shows here this week outside the Rivoli. But I mean, I still don't do it anywhere near as often as I should.
Right.
I don't create anywhere near as many videos as I should for YouTube and stuff. But what I do create does help.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. So that's what I tell young musicians. Just be very hard on yourself and make as much content, especially visual content, as you can possibly stand to make.
That's right.
And then and make sure it's engaging somehow.
Right. So we're both Indigenous background, Indigenous artists, and we have a lot of Indigenous artists that are just starting out and they watch the show, and they always ask, well, how what should I be doing? Like, should I be focusing on songwriting or learning my instrument, or should I be focusing on the business, or what should they be doing to try to get a leg up, in the music business?
Well, a lot of the same answers as to the last question. Now, the difference, I guess, if you're an Indigenous artist, and this is something I've faced my entire career. I grew up in big cities. I didn't grow up in a res. My mom's from a res, but she ran away from it when she was a teenager. She had a rough life. It was third world conditions back then. And she just disappeared into Montreal, where you could disappear. Nobody cared where you were from, and nobody cared what language you spoke, really. I mean, English and French and all that stuff. But back then, there was a little tension that way. But for the most part, if your skin was a different color or your eyes were a different shape, who cares, right?
That's right. Man.
You could do that in a big city. And so, as an aside, my mother even kept it a secret from my dad that she was Indigenous.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she just basically posed as, this girl from down east somewhere. And my dad, my mom was a very beautiful young woman. My dad just thought she was really cute and didn't care about her ethnicity. He was new to Canada. He was from Scotland, So he figured, well, I guess she's just a local girl, And then they were married 7 years when something came from Department of Indian Affairs in the mail, and my dad was off sick that day. He just saw an envelope with a window in it, and he opened it up, thought it was for a bill for him to pay, and realized it was from the government, from my mom. And she was out at the grocery store, and when she came home, he stood there laughing. He says, "Hey, Marie, do you know you're an Indian?" And she was mortified. "Oh, I was going to tell you. I'm so sorry." He says, "I don't care. It's fine. I don't give a poop. Everything's fine. I don't care if you're from planet Zorton. I love you." And so it all worked out just great. But so the Indigenous side of who I am is very important, obviously. And then by the time I came along, my mom had made peace with her background and everything was fine. We would go back regularly for visits on holidays to Nova Scotia, and I'd meet all my relatives and hang out in the res. And I started to feel very at home in my Indigenous family half, But the downside was that I was a big city boy, I was raised like a white kid in a francophone neighborhood in Montreal. So, my mom's reality listening to Hank Snow on the res, and then my reality listening to Beau Dommage in Montreal was quite different.
That's right.
And then I was, as far as musical influences go, I was more drawn to R&B, soul, jazz, and very urban kind of music, right? And so when I started having a career in music, there was a certain amount of, are you going to exploit your Indigenous side? Because it was cool by then, right?
Right, that's right.
In the late 80s, early 90s, Dances with Wolves, all that stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So I kind of thought, I understand I could throw some chanting or drumming or something on some tunes, but I didn't grow up with that stuff. I really didn't. So I just decided that I would let everybody know I'm Indigenous, but you wouldn't be able necessarily to throw my CDs on and say, "Oh yeah, I can hear the powwow," and that,
Sure.
Some people would say they could hear it, but I'd say, okay, well, great. Guess that's maybe predisposition or something. But for Indigenous artists, I think there's always this question: how much do I play up that side of my heritage, or if it's my entire heritage? Do I make a big deal of it? Do I not make a big deal of it? And obviously, there are a lot of artists who do really emphasize their Indigenous side and have been very successful as a result. Tribe Called Red.
Sure, yeah.
That's a good example. And then and several others. So I think if it really feels like something that you want to showcase and that you feel is a huge part of your identity and you should really let it out,
right,
then go for it. And it does let you stick out, you know. You're not the same as everybody else.
That's right.
And in some cases it can be seen as, you know, so ridiculously cool that it's a huge advantage.
That's right.
So you can go for it. I think also there's maybe the other side of it is that you can be pigeonholed a bit. You know, and then expected, you know, to sound a certain way or be a certain thing. So I prefer for myself to be able to do whatever the hell I want, you know.
Yeah.
You know, if I want to do a vocal record, if I want to do a record with the orchestra, if I want to just do a solo guitar record, if I want to do a collaborative thing. I'm thinking about putting a piano album out just for the hell of it.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
awesome.
just do whatever.
Sure.
And I mean, nobody's saying, but it doesn't sound like your indigenous heritage, and I don't have to worry about it. You know, it's okay. It's what I've always done. Right?
That's right. Well, that's awesome. So speaking of music, you're going to do a track for us or a song.
If you exist.
Yeah. Let's set it up. What?
All right.
Or have you thought about it? I know we're just kind of springing it on you.
Sure, I'll just play you something happy. As a tune off the new record. I used to live in a little hamlet right on the water in Nova Scotia called Seabright.
Okay.
That's where I wrote a lot of the music that's on the new record. And so the tune it's maybe a little bit Bruce Cockburn-y. I think that his influence definitely comes through in the tune. And it's in this lovely low tuning, and it's just called Seabright, just named after that town.
All right.
Hopefully you can hear the salt water in it.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here's Don Ross. Awesome. Thank you so much. And do you want to let people know how they can find you online?
They can find me at donrossonline.com. That's my website, and all the usual other places. I just don't do the TikTok X thing, but I do all the Threads, Instagram, but most of the time you'll find me at Don Ross Music at those.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show today, and good luck on the rest of the tour.
Tons of fun. Thanks, you guys.